The Hammerhead Karoo 2, easily the most hyped bike GPS ever, and the great hope for breaking the Garmin and Wahoo duopoly. How does it stack up, and should you buy one? Well, after about 9 months of using one, I'm ready to give my final thoughts. Let's start with the Karoo 2's hardware, and it's my favourite overall package of any GPS, with nice slim profile, quite small bezels, a well implemented touchscreen, physical buttons all around the edge, and USB-C charging. It's really hard to go back from a big screen GPS once you've gotten used to them, so don't be afraid that it'll feel too large if you buy one, if you're already used to something that's a little bit smaller. Now, I've always been fairly hostile to small touchscreen GPSs because they're just such a damn pain to use. Think about the Garmin Edge 830 and the Brighton Rider 750 as good examples of this, but the Karoo 2 is big enough to actually make the touchscreen useful. Setting up the device and navigating through the menus is nice and easy with the touch and swipe controls. Then when writing, I prefer the physical buttons around the edges, which are well placed and easy to use. The screen is also vivid and easy to read with plenty of data field options, really nice maps, and plenty of pretty colors. Not all is perfect though with the hardware. First, the touchscreen is completely useless if you're wearing gloves. Second, you really need to run the backlight at 50% or higher. This is currently on 100% right now, if you want it to be visible in the bright sun, and that really eats into the battery life. So I think 10 to 11 hours is a reasonable expectation if you're a heavy user with navigation and backlight on. And 10 to 11 hours is only really okay. It's sort of decent for a big screen, sort of flagship size GPS, but it's really not that good when you look across the market. My least favorite part of the hardware though is the SIM card slot in the back. I just don't really think there's a good justification for this spec choice when Bluetooth and Wi-Fi already exist and are ubiquitous in bike GPS units. A quick note on the mounts. I quite like the Karoo's out front system with its slide and click, despite it looking a little bit weird without a GPS actually in it, but I do appreciate that they've supplied an extra Garmin adapter, which really opens up all of the world of options of Garmin mounts for you to sort of have a bit more flexibility and control over where and how you mount it. Overall, I really love the Hammerhead hardware despite a few imperfections. I think it's just a really good overall package. Next up, I want to talk about the user interface because it's such a refreshing take on how we use bike GPS units. The Karoo 2 is built on an Android operating system, had a major firmware upgrade in late 2021, and it really brought it closely into line with what a smartphone interface would be like. You have really simple menus with either a tile system or a swipe down with everything quite easy to find and logically grouped together. I never really found myself in deep menu rabbit holes like I tend to with something like Garmin. And on that note, using the Karoo 2 really shows how bad Garmin's menus actually are. Wahoo and Brighton are certainly better than Garmin, but Hammerhead have really crushed it for simple usability. From a living with it perspective, this is just a damn nice GPS. It's also really nice when you're out on the bike. There's bike profiles for people who like to tie different data screens to a particular bike with different sensors. You get an elevation tracking system called Climber, which pops up to give you data on noteworthy climbs on your route. And there's the standard variety of automatic features, battery saver, and a bunch more. Garmin's platform is still definitely the absolute king when you look at sheer quantity and variety of features. But I didn't really feel like there was much lacking in this except for Bluetooth uploading, which I'll come back to a bit later. It has just been a generally nice unit to live with. Next up is maps and navigation, and they're handled quite well overall with, your nice big yellow line and chevrons showing you where the route goes and plenty of warning over how far it is to your next turn. The maps themselves have plenty of detail, including street names, bathrooms, places you can fill up your water. You can unlock it and freely scroll around the map to see what's around you as well. Then there's the ability to download maps from basically anywhere else in the world straight to the head unit. And I tried it with some African maps and it seems to work fine. There's also quite a few gigabytes of free storage in here, so don't be afraid to sort of load it up with maps and then just delete them as you need. Out on the bike, the big screen lets you have data fields and maps together with everything clearly visible, which is my favorite way to ride. I pretty much spend most of my rides doing that. Overall, maps and navigation really doesn't feel like it's behind Garmin and Wahoo in any major way. I do think that Garmin's maps are just generally a little bit better overall, and I think that Wahoo's navigation, routing and rerouting is a little bit stronger than the Karoo 2, but there weren't really many times I kind of got annoyed at this like I have with some other GPSs. It's a good overall platform. Next up are the integrations, and bike GPS integrations with external software are something that's sort of become quite expected, and they are a little bit confused with the Karoo 2. Firstly, you do get a really good Strava live segment system, consumes all your segments and gives you a great dashboard so you can pace your effort and, sort of chase any targets. You can then just swipe it off the screen if you want to ignore it completely. They do also let you turn segment chasing on and off if there are some segments that you don't want to actually chase at any given time. Unfortunately, getting routes onto the head unit is not as well implemented as this, whether you're using Strava or Ride with GPS. The fastest way to get those routes onto the head unit is to manually use a web browser, copy-paste the URL of the route that you've created into the Hammerhead dashboard, and then that sort of consumes it and makes it available on your head unit. And look, it's an awkward system, especially when compared against Wahoo's super slick process of just getting it onto the unit via your phone in no time at all. There's also a Training Peaks integration too, where you can copy-paste in your workouts in much the same way, but I don't use that, and I don't really have any thoughts on the sort of general training systems within this unit. I just haven't really used it. So those integrations are kind of there, but a little bit half-baked. I would like to see some improvements to bring it up to standard with what people are expecting from the other major players in the market. Speaking of half-baked, the Hammerhead phone app isn't really a phone app. It only seems to exist to transmit notifications from your phone to your head unit, which is something that I hate, and I turn it off immediately anyway. There's no setup or Bluetooth uploading through the app, so to me it's basically useless. Direct uploading your rides has to be done through Wi-Fi, either your home network, or you can even hotspot to your mobile device if you really want. Feels really weird to not have a functional phone app or Bluetooth uploads in 2022, and I feel like Hammerhead were really expecting that SIM slot on the back to be the main link between the Karoo 2 and the internet. But it just ends up being a drawback of the system. I mean, who really wants a SIM card for their bike GPS? I sure as hell don't. From a market positioning perspective, the Hammerhead kind of occupies its own place with just a single product available priced at $639, which is the same bracket as the Garmin Edge 830 and the Wahoo Element Bolt, with some variance depending on your local market prices. And I would honestly say I prefer the Karoo 2 over both the 830 and the Element Roam. I just didn't really care for the 830's hardware, and the Element Roam feels too expensive, especially compared against the Bolt V2. That said, I actually prefer the Edge 530 and the Element V2 over the Edge 830 and the Element Roam. Those mid-range devices just bring so much value for so much less money, and I always gravitate towards that sort of corner of the market when I have to spend my own money. And that kind of brings me to an important point. If you just want a great bike GPS with tons of features and for quite a good price, then you should buy either the Garmin Edge 530 or the Bolt V2. The Karoo 2 is for more of your tech nerds, the kind of people who aren't so budget conscious, are willing to accept the quirks that I've outlined in this video, and just want a really nice hardware and a premium user experience. And honestly, that's kind of exactly my demographic. I'm definitely going to keep using this even though the review period is functionally done, because I've come to like it. Even with all of its flaws, it's just such a nice experience to use and have out there on the bike. I'm just kind of too much of a tech nerd to take the Bolt V2 or the Edge 530 if I've got something like this available at the same time. There might be some instances where if battery life is a concern, I don't want to have to charge a unit during a really long ride. Maybe I'm bikepacking where I might choose those other units, but generally day to day, I'm happy with this as my sort of daily driver. Tying it all together then, the Hammerhead Karoo 2 is a strong alternative that does a lot of things really well. The product matured a lot between that weird brick of a first generation and this much more well thought out second generation. And I'm excited to see where they take this concept, especially now that SRAM has made an acquisition of Hammerhead. And despite a few shortcomings, I think that it is actually quite a good value premium unit, if that makes any sense. It's my favorite unit in the range between something like the Edge 530 and Bolt V2 and the top-end Garmin Edge 1030 Plus. I think this is the strongest unit within that sort of upper middle tier. I do want to acknowledge that this unit was sent for review by Hammerhead, but it's fully independent and all of the editorial control is my own. I hope this has been of value to anyone who's thinking of making a purchase decision. If you want to see other GPS alternatives, my channel is covered in different GPS videos. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to ride safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.